I'm going to treat this video a bit differently than I would treat any other newly released games review. First, I'm not going to give a spoiler buffer because there is no way for me to discuss what I want to discuss without immediately revealing plot points and surprises. Secondly, I won't be giving my usual history lesson as an intro. I want to make this quick critique actually quick for once, so I'll say it now. If you're interested in playing this game and are asking for a recommendation, I appreciate you endlessly for choosing my video, and I hope maybe you could watch some of my other videos. But I don't want to ruin the story for you, so I would have to suggest someone else's. But if you're here to listen to what I thought of Naughty Dog's latest divisive game, then you're in the right place. The Last of Us Part 2 struck me as the opposite side of the coin in just about every sense when compared to its predecessor. Where The Last of Us 1 ended with me feeling a sense of off-balance relief and uncertainty, the sequel ended with me having narrative whiplash and being so confused on what the point of all of this was. Where the first game had new characters being cycled in and out to keep things interesting, the second game adopts a dual perspective narrative that has its moments, but the characters in the second spotlight are noticeably weaker. And where the first game had passable combat encounters that were more of a drag than anything, the second game requires that you learn its new systems and always be on your toes for the intense and incredible fights to come. But let's go one step at a time here. I've been trying to think of something to compare this to, and the most commonly seen comparison is Metal Gear Solid 2. But I feel like that's a bit of a stretch. You'll find yourself playing a few hours with the protagonist scene and all the promotional material, the trailers, and the startup image, just to be swapped off for someone else. And in this case, with a pissed off plank of wood with boobs and anchor arms. Abby occupies about half of the game that I thought was going to be all about Ellie. But similarly to MGS2, I don't think the bait and switch here was ever the point, nor does it feel right to call it that. They weren't trying to trick you into buying a game about Ellie just to sneakily have you actually control Abby, but in this case, I wasn't really a fan of the switch and would have just preferred a story about the bait. If you couldn't tell by now, Abby never clicked for me. I can definitely see why she would want to hunt down Joel, but she also has next to no regard for her friends. She's just kind of, what are those?
You're a piece of shit, Abby.
Yeah, that. And she's no nonsense at all. And that might be because she's meant to contrast with Ellie because they've gone through similar situations. But I could never get into her headspace throughout. It also doesn't help that the game lost my full attention towards the middle. It felt like there was a whole lot of stop and go. The story was progressing fine with Ellie and we get to a very important moment and the game decides to make us go back and experience Abby's events leading up to the big encounter. This lasts about 6.5 hours though. Now, I don't mind this in its entirety. Abby wasn't insufferable at least, and it was neat to see how much she sucked at making nice with people to fuel that anger she has, but then that stop and go rears its head into the picture. Okay, we're getting ready to progress the plot, but then, something happens and we have to go 2 hours out of our way again to get some medicine. And I get that these instances aren't devoid of little moments in character building, but if I'm already ambivalent about the characters, I just want it to end so we can go back to the people I'm actually invested in. The first game had tons of little distractions and side characters to meet and then say goodbye to along the way to the hospital, but it always felt like you were progressing through the story. By the time we eventually get to the climax here, however, I'm feeling very similarly to how I felt at the end of Jedi Fallen Order. Why did I go on this grand journey and overcome all of these odds just to kind of have everything fizzle out? Oh, I'm so mad at you, I'm gonna kill you. Oh wait, you get sad sometimes too? Never mind. Oh, well now I'm so mad at you and I'm gonna kill you. Oh, never mind. I remembered that you get sad too sometimes. In storytelling, there's a rule that most follow. Only use coincidence to get your characters into trouble, never out of trouble. While the latter would come across as a lazy attempt to write yourself out of a corner, I am thankful that The Last of Us 2 never does this. However, I think there should be a limit on how many times you should lean on that first rule as well. because you eventually start going, okay guys, let's think of another way to move the plot forward, please. The journey was just a little long-winded at times, and it lost its momentum on more than a few occasions. I wasn't offended by the ending or anything, and I get that it happened because they let their anger control them, but I can't say I enjoy the resolution personally. The narrative could have been a much more digestible addition to the first game's story if it had just reordered a few events and paced itself a bit better. As a companion piece, it's quite different. The themes are darker here for sure. Everyone has a vendetta against someone. And when this game wants to be violent, it really doesn't mind showing you how far it will go. Gruesome imagery is constant in this game. It can come out of nowhere and surprise you too, or it can be a slow burn that makes you wince as you have to continually mash that button. The game has lots of great moments throughout. A few are very large and the center of attention when they do happen, but a good number of them are heavily subdued. These lovely vistas the game often treats you to are some of my favorite parts. The devil is in the details, as they always say, and Naughty Dog is very aware. If you look hard enough, you can find some great little moments that didn't need to be there, but are much appreciated. Puzzles involving the use of these new ropes are something that I was enamored with for some reason. Probably because physics simulations are always so fun, and it's no surprise a dumb grin was on my face when I got to see these makeshift ropes interact with the world. Even when they freaked out a little bit, it was still pretty funny. When I played through the first game back in 2018, I was going through on the hardest difficulty. This was my mistake. The first game had an incredibly compelling story that you would play the game to get to the story part. But the second game, on the other side of that coin, is something that you watch through so you can get to the game part. There's no question in my mind that The Last of Us Part 2 is at its best when it's being a video game. The first game was pretty much just a bland third-person cover shooter with some light crafting and melee stuff thrown in, and you could say the same thing for Part 2, but all that clunky stuff was trimmed or declunkified, and you were given God's personal gift. No, not a grappling hook, not wall running, not juggling enemies in combos. You were given a dodge button. This is so ridiculous looking, but it allows you to actually stand a chance against others if they get to you before you get to them. And you can even just beat zombies to death if you're the world star over here. In the first game, you just had to make sure you aimed well enough to kill them before they killed you. Now, you can pull off some amazing stuff if you've got the skills. Even if jumping sometimes feels a little off, everything else feels incredible in the heat of combat. The organic and believable level design also helps to bring some reality into your choices in the encounters. Pulling off these combinations of gunfire, dodging, and melee attacks to take down strings of enemies is so gratifying. It almost gives a speedrunner's mentality to the sandbox. I find myself constantly thinking about how I could have done it differently, and then trying to take everybody out as efficiently and as stylishly as possible. There are now skill trees that both Ellie and Abby can unlock by finding books in the world, as well as safes and gun caches that can be broken into if you search your environments to find the answers. And it's always worth the search. Crafting has made a great return, and the things that you can craft now have more interesting purposes. Like the trip mine you can use as Ellie to take down a patrol of enemies, or even trick a dog by luring them into your scent trail and then blowing them up. Seriously, I hated the dogs, but I hated killing them even more. I'm sorry, puppy. My only problem with the combat encounters is that there's no real point in replaying them. It's not like the Arkham games where you could try to get a different special takedown or something to get a high score or unlock special skins for your characters. I get that making a special headshot challenge in a narratively tense situation doesn't make the most sense, but I think it would give players a good reason to go back, seeing as how there isn't one at the moment. They did a really fantastic job retooling everything from the last game to make it a smoother experience overall. There are a few things I thought we could leave behind with the jump to the end of the next generation of consoles, but it's nothing I'll lose sleep over. The narrative is a bit drawn out at times and could have been trimmed to keep the pace a bit more consistent, but it was by no means bad. Abby was a protagonist that I think could have been further elaborated on in a DLC chapter without making our progression start over in the middle of the game. This could be done similarly to the first game by handling it how Left Behind was handled. I understand that the moral is not to let hatred consume you, but I would have liked some actual resolution. The only thing that we got was an ending where most are dead and none are happy. There's even some concept art that shows Ellie in areas that only Abby ever goes to, so I wonder if there was going to be less focus on Abby altogether earlier in development, or if Ellie was merely there to identify scope or something. The combat encounters make the game worth playing alone. I just wish there was more incentive to go back and do so. This game is an incredibly impressive effort made by a huge team of professionals who know how to make a great game, and it absolutely doesn't deserve some pissed off kids trashing its reputation. It's also not a 10 out of 10 in my book, and while I'm aware 10 out of 10 doesn't mean perfect, it just doesn't feel right saying this game is on that level for me. As always, I appreciate you for watching, so thanks for stopping by and have a great day.